What's up? I'm Pip, and this is Brewin on a Budget. Today's deck is a Grixis control deck starring Obeka and Splinter of Seconds, coming in at a wondrous $100. So, what it do? This is turnkey commander at its finest. Obeka is a new and unique commander. When she connects, she grants us additional upkeep steps equal to the damage she did. Our plan? Well, we're loading up on effects that deliver value and damage and diminish our opponents during our upkeep. We'll then multiply our attack phases with a powered up and unblockable Obeka, transforming each upkeep into magnificent multiple upkeeps. To safeguard our master plan, we're arming ourselves with a slew of counterspells and board wipes, fortifying our defenses while accelerating our ascent with nimble 2-mana mana rocks. So, if you like casting a few spells, then sitting back and watching the value roll in, this is the deck for you. Let's dive in. Alright, let's kick it off with some of our cool upkeep effects. First up, Descent into Avernus. Beginning of your upkeep, put 2 Descent counters on Descent into Avernus. Then each player creates X treasure tokens, and Descent into Avernus deals X damage to each player, where X is the number of Descent counters on Descent into Avernus. This is going to stack up pretty quickly, dealing a ton of damage to each player and creating a bunch of treasures. Luckily, we have a number of ways to recover all that lost life and put that treasure to good use. Palace Siege. 5 mana enchantment, and when it comes into play, we get to choose one of these effects. Either we're going to return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand each turn, or we're going to drain each opponent for 2 and gain 2 life. Subversion. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent loses 1 life, and we gain life equal to the life lost this way. This life gain should scale with the number of opponents in the game, unlike a lot of the other ones. Honden of Seen Wind. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card for each shrine you control. We're only going to be playing 2 shrines in this deck, but fortunately for us, they're 2 of the best ones. So the chances of having them both out at the same time is kinda low, but either of these effects are worth the mana we're paying for it. Honden of Night's Reach. At the beginning of your upkeep, target opponent discards a card for each shrine you control. Unfortunately, this only hits 1 opponent, but when we have multiple upkeeps, we can make sure there's enough to go around. The Ruinous Powers. At the beginning of your upkeep, choose an opponent at random. Exile the top card of that player's library. Dawn of turn, you may play that card, and you may spend mana as though we're mana of any color to cast it. When you cast a spell this way, its owner loses life equal to its mana value. So here's a good way for us to tack on some extra damage each turn and get some value. Plus, who among us doesn't like the look on our opponent's face when we start using their decks against them? Thopter Spy Network. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you control an artifact, create a 1/1 Thopter artifact creature token with flying. And whenever 1 or more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. This should be creating at least 1 Thopter for us each turn, and we can turn those Thopters into extra card advantage. Court of Ambition. When this enters the battlefield, we become the Monarch, and at the beginning of our upkeep, each opponent loses 3 life unless they discard a card. If you're the Monarch, instead, they lose 6 life or discard 2 cards. Imagine playing this, then having 4 or 5 upkeeps before your opponents can even react. Ouch! Protection Racket. Beginning of your upkeep, repeat the following process for each opponent in turn order. Reveal the top card of your library. That player may pay life equal to that card's mana value. If they do, exile that card. Otherwise, put it in your hand. If your opponents don't want you to have a full handful of cards, they're gonna have to start paying the tax man. Phyrexian Arena. Absolute classic card. And it's found a good home here. At the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card, and you lose 1 life. Gravestorm. At the beginning of your upkeep, target opponent may remove a card in his or her graveyard from the game. If that player doesn't, you may draw a card. With this card, we're going to just pick on whoever has the least amount of cards in their graveyard, or is playing recursion. It should be pretty easy to keep drawing cards off of this every single turn. As Foretold. This might be the perfect deck for this card. Upkeep. Put a time counter on As Foretold. Once each turn, you may pay 0 rather than pay the mana cost for a spell you cast with mana value X or less, where X is the number of time counters. So basically, you just load this up with counters, and you can cast a free spell each turn. This is how we plan on getting an expensive additional creature or enchantment out each turn, in addition to what we're casting. Lindul's Hex. During your upkeep, Lindul's Hex deals 1 damage to each player. Each player may pay a black or 3 colors to prevent this damage. The main reason we're playing this card is to stack up some extra damage, and it's cheap. Call of the Ring. Upkeep. The ring tempts you. Whenever you choose a creature as your ring bearer, you may pay 2 life. If you do, draw a card. Being a ring bearer should help Obeka get through a little more easily. And if we want to move the ring bearer around, it should help us draw some extra cards. Alright, I'm gonna hit pause real quick just to ask you to smash that like and subscribe button. Looking at the data over on my supercomputer, I can see that only 1% of you nerds who watch my videos are subscribed. Now, I'm gonna have to sell my kidneys if I don't get about, 32% of you guys to subscribe to my channel. Alright, back to the video. Grim Reaper Sprint. This is an R that gives +2/+2 in haste. And the turn it comes into play, you get an additional combat phase. And it should be pretty easy to reduce the cost of this. If we have a creature we don't mind sending into an idiotic combat. Dragon Master Outcast. Upkeep. If you control 6 or more lands, create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. This seems to be the perfect home for this card. After turn 6, we're going to be spitting out multiple dragon tokens every single turn. Creeping Bloodsucker. The beginning of your upkeep, Creeping Bloodsucker deals 1 damage to each opponent. You gain life equal to the damage dealt this way. We're stacking up on these effects to keep our life total high and tax our opponents. Sin Prodder. Upkeep. Reveal the top card of your library. Any opponent may have you put that card into your graveyard. If a player does, Sin Prodder deals damage to that player equal to that card's converted mana cost. Otherwise, put it in your hand. Just another way to draw more cards each turn, or tax our opponents. Thassa, God of the Sea. As long as your devotion to blue is less than 5, Thassa isn't a creature. Most of the time, we don't want her to be a creature. Upkeep, Scry 1. Not as good as drawing, but still pretty good. And then here's what we're really looking for out of her. For a blue and a colorless, target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. This is one of our ways of getting Obeka through easily and ensuring we have multiple upkeeps each turn. The 9th Doctor. Whenever the 9th Doctor becomes untapped during your untap step, you get an additional upkeep step after this one. Not quite as abusable as Obeka, but it'll give us an extra upkeep each turn. Arakakra Sneak. 1/4 flyer for 4, and when it enters the battlefield, you take the initiative. I'm going to be playing a number of cards that take the initiative. I'm going to just put it up on the screen here for a little bit so you can see it, in case you're not familiar. Basically what happens is when you take the initiative, you enter a dungeon, and during your upkeep, you move further in the dungeon. Since we'll be taking multiple upkeeps, we're going to be moving through these dungeons pretty quickly, which means we shouldn't have too much trouble racking up all of these effects. This is one of our main ways for buffing up Obeka and getting even more upkeeps. We're playing enough of these effects that even if our opponent should steal the initiative from us, we could take it right back. Blood Oil Sorcerer. 3/3 for 4 mana, and you take the initiative when it enters the battlefield. Plus, you could pay 2 and sacrifice an artifact or creature and goad target creature. We won't be able to take full advantage of this second effect, but it is nice to have in case we ever need it. Headliner Scarlet. 3/3 for 4 mana. Haste. When she enters the battlefield, target player's creatures can't block this turn. And during your upkeep, you're going to impulse draw, which means exiling the top card of your library, and you can play until the end of your turn. Stirring Bard. 0/4 defender for 4, and when it enters the battlefield, you take the initiative. You can tap it to give target creature menace and haste until end of turn. This gives us the initiative and makes it harder to block some of our creatures. Solemn Simulacrum. Most decks that don't have access to Green's mana ramp should probably play this card, just to help improve your consistency. Indulgent Tormentor. 5 mana, 5/3 flyer. At the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card unless target opponent sacrifices a creature or pays 3 life. I'd imagine you're mostly going to be drawing cards off of this, which is just fine with me. Tigum, Sidisi's Hand. 5 mana, 3/4. Skip your draw step. But at the beginning of your upkeep, look at the top 3 cards of your library. Oh, now you're talking. Put one of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. From this guy, we're going to draw a few extra cards each turn and have some selection. Plus, if we're in a pinch, we can use them for removal. Combat Celebrant. Basically, every other turn when this attacks, you can get 2 combat steps, which is really going to allow us to start racking up those upkeeps. Lizard Blades. 2 mana, 1/1, double strike. And you can reconfigure it as an equipment. 99% of the time, we're just going to want to throw this on Obeka, which is going to give us even more upkeeps. Relentless Assault. 4 mana, extra combat this turn. World at War. 5 mana, extra combat this turn and next turn. Quantum Misalignment. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it isn't legendary. Rebound, which means you get to do it again next turn. Most of the time, we're probably just going to want to cast this on Obeka and get even more Obekas. Great Train Heist. This is one of the new spree cards. It has 3 options, one of which is an additional combat. The second one is +1/+0 on first strike. The third is whenever a creature connects, we're going to create a treasure. Most of the time, we just want this for extra combat steps, but later in the game when we have extra mana, we could use some of the other effects too. Ill-timed explosion. Here's one of our board wipes that could also draw us cards. Deadly cover-up. Cost-wise, this is one of the cheaper board wipes, but the rest of its text is irrelevant for Commander. If you have something better, use that instead. I'm just using it to keep our budget down. Blasphemous Act. I like to play a few board wipes just in case we fall behind. This one scales better the further we fall behind. 3 steps ahead. This one's either a counterspell, creates a copy of an artifact or creature, or draws us some extra cards. We're going to be playing a few counterspells just to protect our game plan. Counterspell, in case we want to counter a spell. Negate. This should protect our board from board wipes if we're in a commanding position. The Invasion of Fiora. Another board wipe for 6 mana. This one we can destroy all legendary or non-legendaries. Or both. And if we defeat it, we can flip it over into Marchesa, Resolute Monarch. Whenever she attacks, we can remove all counters from up to 1 target permanent. Might be relevant if someone's playing Super Friends or Hardened Scales. And during your upkeep, if you haven't been dealt damage since your last turn, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. Staff of Nin. Beginning of your upkeep, draw a card. 6 mana is a little pricey for this effect, but we don't have to worry about paying life for it. And we can ping something each turn. Hexplate Wallbreaker. 5 mana artifact that comes with a 2/2 creature and gives a creature +2/+2. Whenever a quick creature attacks, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, untap each attacking creature. After that phase, there is an additional combat phase. So this is just another card that's going to give us an extra combat phase each turn. Make sure you trigger this one first because it only works once. Make sure you trigger this one first because it only works once. Ceravac's Tome. This is going to double up on a couple effects that we like. First off, when it comes into play, we're going to take the initiative, which means we're going to start to move through one of those dungeons. And it also doubles as a mana rock. It taps for 2 mana if you have the initiative. And finally, if we do end up completing a dungeon, which I'm sure we will, we're going to be able to draw and cast a free card each turn. Whisper Silk Cloak. This is just here to protect our commander. But with a deck that relies on connecting with a creature, we're going to need a few instances of this. Replicating Ring. This is a 3 mana rock. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a night counter on Replication Ring. But once it has 8 of them, we're going to create 8 copies of this card. Pretty sweet. I think we can get it done in 2 to 3 turns. Chromatic Lantern. This is just here to ensure we have the right color mana all of the time. Tithing Blade. When this comes into play, each opponent is going to sacrifice a creature. Then, if we craft it with a creature, it's going to flip on over to Consuming Sepulcher, which is going to drain our opponents for 1 each upkeep. Ivory Tower. Classic Timmy card. But in this deck, I think it could end up being pretty good. We should be able to keep our hand full and gain a bunch of extra life each turn. After that, we're playing a bunch of 2 mana rocks. I've decided to go with 2 mana rocks so that we can hit our commander on turn 3 consistently. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. I don't think these need much explanation. Talisman of Indulgence, Talisman of Dominance, Talisman of Creativity, Sky Diamond, Fire Diamond, Rakdos Signet, Izzet Signet, Dimir Signet, Belor Stone, Cold Steel Heart, Arcane Signet, Wayfarer's Bauble, and Soul Ring. Now, let's take a look at the lands. Minas Morgul, Dark Fortress. This enters the battlefield tapped and produces black mana. But if we pay 4, we can put a shadow counter on target creature, which will make it unblockable in most situations. Access Tunnel. Target creature with power 3 or less can't be blocked this turn. We gotta make sure we don't make our Obeka too big, but while she's still relatively small, she's not gonna be able to be blocked. Rogue's Passage. Same idea here. This is going to tap for colorless mana, and for 4 mana, target creature is unblockable. Crumbling Necropolis. This is a cheap tri-land. Feel free to replace it, or add the expensive one if you haven't. Xander's Lounge. Command Tower. For obvious reasons. After that, we're going to be playing a handful of dual lands. I'm going to go through them fairly quickly. I would try to play at least as many as I have listed here. I tended to lean towards some of the cheaper ones, but feel free to use whatever you have. Blackcleave Cliffs. Canyon Slough, Dragon Skull Summit, Foreboding Ruins, Geothermal Bog, Sulphurous Springs, Temple of Malice, Choked Estuary, Contaminated Aquifer, Dark Slick Shores, Drowned Catacomb, Fetid Pools, Temple of Deceit, Underground River, Frostboil Snarl, Molten Tributary, Shivan Reef, Spire Bluff Canal, Sulphur Falls, and Temple of Epiphany. I'm going to be running 1 island, 6 mountains, and 5 swamps. I put a fair amount of effort into figuring out the mana base that works for what I built, but if you shift around some other cards in the deck, feel free to change it. So that's the deck. I feel like it's a pretty unique brew. I've not seen many decks that function like this. It's a cool gimmick, I can't wait to give it a try. But what did you think? Did you like it? Am I an idiot? Let me know in the comments. And I'll see you in the next one.